Hi everyone, and welcome from Claranet Cybersecurity to today's presentation on the OWASP Top 10 series. Today we will be looking specifically at A5 Broken Access Control. Just a little introduction on myself. I am a penetration tester for Sec1 and have been working in IT for the last 10 years now, mainly coming from a development background. I'm also an offensive security certified professional and CREST registered tester. So on the agenda for today, we will look at what is broken access control, how we can identify it, and also how we can prevent it. Here we can see a full list of the OWASP Top 10 and all the topics that we will be covering throughout this series, so do stay tuned in. Let's jump into today's presentation covering A5 Broken Access Control. So what is broken access control? Well, this type of vulnerability occurs when a user can act outside of their intended permissions. Examples of this are accessing other site users' confidential information, elevating their current privileges, for example, acting as an admin while being logged in as a regular user, or bypassing access control checks. We will get into some examples a bit later. So what does broken access control lead to? Well, it leads to unauthorized information disclosure or the modification or destruction of data. So how do we identify broken access control vulnerabilities? Well, the best way currently is by manual means. Now, what we mean by this is to not rely completely on automated tooling, as these tools can be good at detecting the absence of access control, but they are not good at verifying if access control is functional. Broken access control is a common security risk, and the reasons behind this are because automated tools are not great at detecting it, so it goes unnoticed quite often. Developers are not testing for access control issues effectively, and also the design and management of access control is very complex. What are some of the impacts of broken access control? This can lead to unauthorized information disclosure, attackers being able to read sensitive data, or even modify or destroy the data. Another big impact is being able to perform business functions outside of the limits of what the attacker should be able to do. And lastly, attackers acting as administrators, for example, being able to perform admin actions while only logged in as a regular user. All of these vulnerabilities can have a huge impact on the organization and affect them negatively. Let's take a look at some examples of broken access control now. In this presentation, I will cover two types of broken access control: insecure direct object reference and missing access control. So what is insecure direct object reference? Well, this type of vulnerability occurs when developers use identifiers for direct access to internal objects or resources, but provide no access control checks. If we look at the first example of insecure direct object reference, the insecure site allows users to access their profile information in the URL by passing in a profile ID. Here, an attacker is able to supply the ID of another site user and gain access to their profile. In the second example, we can see that the insecure site allows the reading of arbitrary files. We can see that the attacker is able to request a file outside of the web root. Let's take a look at some examples of this now. In this live example, I will be demonstrating one type of insecure direct object reference, known as directory traversal, also known as file path traversal. This type of vulnerability allows attackers to read arbitrary files off the servers. This may include code, credentials, and sensitive operating system files. Here we see an insecure site that requests a page in the URL. So what happens if we request a file that is out of the web server root? Let's take a look. Let's modify the URL and see if we can read the contents of the etc password file. Here we just need to traverse back several directories out of the web root and then access the file we want. Excellent. So now we can see that we have successfully read the password file through the insecure application, as the application lacks the correct checks to prevent this type of security flaw. Let's take another look at an example of insecure direct object reference. In this example, we are able to view the details of other site users' profiles. We should only be able to view our own profile information as it contains confidential data. Let's see this. So here we have access to my profile page. If we look in the URL, we can see it takes a profile ID. What happens if we change this ID to the user's ID, like 2? Excellent. We can now see it's possible to view the confidential data of another site user just by modifying the URL. This vulnerability happens because the insecure site fails to check that the profile being requested actually belongs to the logged-in user. Other examples of broken access control include missing access control. Missing access control occurs when the application fails to verify the access level rights before making the functionality available to the user. An example of this include being able to access an admin page without being an admin user, or accessing development resources without being a developer of the site. Let's take a look at a case study. AT&T suffered an indirect object reference vulnerability a while back that exposed the details of at least 100,000 user accounts. So how did this happen? Well, the hack worked by exploiting a bug in the registration process. AT&T uses the email address as the account name when logging in. AT&T populates the form with your account name so you don't have to type it in again. But unlike most web applications that pull your account info from a cookie, AT&T used the ICC ID from the mobile phone chip in the URL to pull in your account information. AT&T assigns the ICC ID to the customer sequentially, which means it was easily guessable. Attackers just incremented the IDs of millions of accounts and were able to populate the forms with customer account names, allowing them to gain access to over 100,000 email addresses. So how do we prevent and remediate broken access control? Well, with the exception of public resources, deny all by default. Access control should check record ownership and make sure the user who is trying to read or update the resource actually owns that resource. The web server directory listing should also be disabled. You should be logging all access control failures and also make sure no sensitive files are present within the web root. Finally, I just want to leave you with some resources that you might find helpful on broken access control. Well, that's all from me and the Claranet cybersecurity team. I hope you all enjoyed this introduction to broken access control. Bye for now, and thank you for watching.